If you want to know the story of the Wright brothers, there's a couple of places you can find that story out. One is, of course, the Outer Banks of North Carolina with its one end of the story. But if you want to find out the beginning, you have to go to Dayton, Ohio. That's what we're going to find out today, plus much more at Carillon Park here in Dayton, Ohio. So don't go away. Join me. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this show on the Out of the Norm show, where the stories are all about you. We'll be right back.
From the barn to a busy medical practice, as a doctor, I have to have something I know is safe and effective. Nixol works on bacteria, viruses, and germs, and even staph infections. It's safe enough that I feel good about using it on my face, as well as on my medical instruments. You can trust Nixol. It's green, and it's effective.
When you need it clean, 100% effective, 100% green, the best antiseptic cleanser in the world. Order today, Nixol.com.
It's the Out of the Norm show, where the stories are all about you, with author, musician, radio and television personality, and all-around nice guy, your host, Norm Allen.
Well, I think I found the place that I'm going to learn some things and probably fill in the blanks from when I was in the 8th grade.
Sure.
Do you think so? I'd like to introduce you to Alex Heckman. He's the Director of Museum Operations here at Carillon Park in Dayton, Ohio, and that's where we're visiting today. This looked like such an interesting place when I looked on your website, just kind of researching where I wanted to go.
Sure.
And that's why I decided to come here. It looks interesting.
Carillon Historical Park's a very interesting place. It's a 65-acre open-air museum, and the park draws its name from the 151-foot-tall Deeds Carillon, which is one of Dayton, Ohio's best-known landmarks, and it's an actual working musical instrument with 57 bells. So it's a fascinating place.
How tall is it?
It's 151 feet tall. From the base, like if you were just standing on the ground at the base of the tower, it would actually be 171 feet tall. And the tower, when it was built between 1940 and 1942, was one of only 6 freestanding Carillon towers in all of North America.
Wow.
So it's a really fascinating story in and of itself. And
Sure.
like I say, it just marks the entrance to so many more fascinating stories.
And that's just coming in the front gate. Well,
Yeah.
we have a long way to go today, don't we?
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's get to it. Alex, this is a really interesting room with all the shiny cash registers. Tell me a little bit about this place.
Absolutely. Dayton, Ohio is famous certainly for the Wright brothers and the invention of flight, but for many people, nothing says Dayton, Ohio like National Cash Register Company, NCR. And in this room we have 90 NCR cash registers, beautiful works of art, most of them dating 1920 and earlier, and they're all representative of a time when NCR had a presence in over 50 countries in their first 20 years of business, and really put Dayton, Ohio on the map. Every piece of these registers, every screw, nut, bolt, widget, you name it, was built on a sprawling campus in Dayton, Ohio that employed over 20,000 people by the mid-20th century.
Well, there's not very many times you can go to a museum and take a pony ride, too.
You're right about that. Not every museum has its own carousel, and here we have the Dayton Carousel of Innovation. It features such things as a pop-top beverage can, a root beer can that you can ride. You can ride a Berry Company Yellow Pages, an NCR cash register, a soapbox derby race car, because the soapbox derby race started
That's right.
in Dayton, Ohio. Even Orville Wright's St. Bernard dog Scipio is on the carousel.
That's right here, right?
Actually, it's right behind us.
Oh, the
here.
big St. Bernard, yeah.
But if you've ever opened a bag of Imes dog food, Imes Dog Food Company was in Dayton, Ohio as well. So you got the puppy tearing through the bag. So it's amazing. It's handcrafted. It's made out of wood, and really a one-of-a-kind carousel.
And it's open year-round.
It's open year-round, 360 days a year here
All right.
at Carillon Park.
Hey, we'll be back in just a little while with more of the Out of the Norm show, so don't go away. There's good stuff coming up from Dayton, Ohio, right here on the Out of the Norm show, where the stories are all about you.
The Out of the Norm show, where the stories are all about you. We'll be right back after this.
This looks like a perfect room for American pickers, unless you're a machinist.
You're right. For someone that's skilled at machining and tooling, they might recognize many of the things in this room. This is the machine shop of the Wright Brothers bicycle business, and surrounding us are pieces like a lathe and a drill press, and probably the most important tool from the aeronautic angle is the wind tunnel. And all of these pieces in this room were driven by one single-speed hit-or-miss engine that made a series of belts and pulleys work to make all of this machining operate. Interestingly enough, this wind tunnel, Wright Brothers did not invent the wind tunnel, but they were the first to use it repeatedly and scientifically for aviation research. And basically you had a fan here, and this belt and pulley could make the fan turn 27 miles per hour wind inside of this box. And then what would happen is that the Wrights would test various wing designs and wing shapes individually.
Oh, down in the box.
Down in the box. So they would take a wind tunnel balance, and then they would mount on each balance a wind foil or airfoil, and they would measure how much it moved. So on the bottom there are these needles. They could measure the lift to drift ratio.
Was this a unique engineering feat for these guys? Did they invent this kind of gauging?
This type of development is really something that they themselves came up with. What they did was they took old scrap metal, hacksaw blades, whatever sort of metal they could find, and they would cut individual shapes out of the metal. So they wanted to determine if they wanted a wing that would be really relatively long and flat, or perhaps something with quite a bit of camber or curvature to it. They just didn't know what might be best, so they took 200 individual shapes and tested each one repeatedly over and over and over again. For you or I, for many of your viewers, it would probably be painstaking work, very tedious, maybe kind of boring work, but Orville Wright said that he could hardly wait for morning to come to get at something that interested him. And in this case, what interested him was the wind tunnel work.
Wow, very interesting.
Yeah, really pretty
It's
neat.
interesting to us too.
Yeah.
So this is one of the most important pieces you have in your museum here, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is the 1905 Wright Flyer 3, which is known as the world's first practical airplane. And it's the only airplane that's ever been designated a National Historic Landmark. What made this airplane so important is that it was longer, taller, wider, and it had a more powerful engine than their earlier two planes. And because of those developments, this aircraft was able to stay up in the air, not for just a few seconds or a few short, unsteady minutes at a time, but by October 5th of 1905, this airplane could stay up in the air for over nearly 40 minutes, flying circles and figure eights and banking and turning, and flying under the full control of the pilot. So as opposed, again, to their earlier two planes.
Now let me look at that timeline again. You said 1905?
1905.
And the Wright brothers flight was in?
Their first flight was December 17th, 1903. So in about a year and a half's time, they go from that very unwieldy flight of 12 seconds on a sand dune, 120 feet, 12 seconds, to being able to stay up in the air for nearly 40 minutes.
In a year and a half's time from development.
It's pretty amazing. What's really mind-blowing is if you think that they built their first aircraft, which was a kite that they flew like two little boys. They flew it in 1899. In 1905, they have a practical, marketable airplane. So in less than 6 years' time, you go from two men in Dayton, Ohio, flying a kite in an old open field to being able to stay up in the air for nearly 40 minutes, bank and turn and fly figure eights.
What would a plane like this cost if you bought one?
At that time, they were selling individual aircraft in the range of today would be like around $150,000 to $300,000.
So how amazing is it that in 12 years' time, it went from those guys with the 12 seconds in Kitty Hawk or Kill Devil Hills to air warfare? In 12 years.
It's amazing. We like to say in Dayton, Ohio, that all flight paths begin in Dayton, Ohio. But think about this. Orville Wright was 32 years old when he flew. He was the pilot on the world's first successful airplane flight of 12 seconds and 120 feet. Near the end of his life, he's 76 years old when he lives to see the day that Chuck Yeager breaks the sound barrier in October of 1947, flying the Bell X-1 rocket plane. So think about that. I mean, you're in your early 30s and you fly for the first time, you're in your mid-70s and someone's breaking the sound barrier. I mean, it just boggles the mind. We like to think that computers and cell phones have progressed so rapidly, but like you say, 12 years between a sand dune, 12-second flight to where there's aerial warfare over Europe. I mean, it's mind-blowing.
It is.
It really is.
The American spirit has been strong for a long time, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I think few things define us as much as our feeling of independence and our contributions to aviation. I mean, we're the only country that's ever walked on the moon. You stop and think about that.
As far as we know.
As far as we know.
Hey, we're going to be right back after a quick break right here in Dayton, Ohio. Don't you dare go away. There's more good stuff on the Out of the Norm show where the stories are all about you. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to the Out of the Norm show. We're in another very interesting place here, Alex, aren't we?
Absolutely. This is Hawthorne Hill.
Hawthorne Hill. We're in Dayton, Ohio.
That's right, and this was the Success Mansion that was planned to be a home for both Wilbur and Orville Wright. It was constructed between 1912.
Let me stop you.
Sure.
What do you mean Success Mansion?
Sure. So they had been living in their father's home, and during the period of them operating a bicycle shop and during the period that they proved that flight was possible and practical. And so as they begin to realize quite a bit of wealth and fame and fortune, they begin to have a lot of dignitaries coming to visit them, both government officials and business leaders from across the United States and from France and Germany and Britain. They were having to put these individuals up at downtown Dayton hotels, and so they wanted to build themselves a home that could accommodate guests and a home that would be more reflective of their fame and fortune. And so they designed themselves a 6,000 square foot estate home or Success Mansion, a place that would allow them to entertain guests, when relevant, and a place that would just have higher stature and sort of reflect who they were. They were the Wright brothers. They were the first to build the world's first successful airplane.
So they were very well aware of their own celebrity then.
I think they really were, and they also were very aware that there were many people out there working to maybe discredit them or to try to claim that someone else had flown first. And so again, it was very much a statement type of home, something that really showed that they had arrived.
It certainly does show that when you look at the grounds. It's such a beautiful, big, old-style mansion.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful. What kind of people visited in this home?
So some very famous people visited here. Henry Ford visited here. Charles Lindbergh. General Hap Arnold, who oversaw all of the aircraft for World War II, visited here. So just a lot of famous people. Orville visited with FDR, not inside the house here, but while here in Oakwood. It was really a who's who of American history in the middle 20th century. Orville was visiting with those folks.
All came through these rooms that we're standing in today.
Absolutely.
Wow.
During the NCR era, you might be interested to know that during the time that NCR Corporation owned the house, some famous people came through, like the golfers Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer. Bill Gates stayed here before he was a multi-billionaire. Just a lot of famous people.
So it draws a lot of attention even today. I mean, here we are in 2012, but there's still a lot of people interested in this house because of Orville Wright.
Absolutely. There's people that want to visit it because of Orville Wright. There are people that want to visit it just because it's a beautiful estate home. And there's also, especially in the greater Dayton region and the Ohio area, there's a mystique to this house because it hadn't been open for the visiting public until 2007. So it's still very much a house sort of shrouded in mystery, people wanting to know what's in that house. How do I get in there?
Alex, this house has had a lot of people live in it and come through it, as we've talked about earlier, but this study has been maintained a certain level of integrity from when Orville Wright lived here, hasn't it?
That's exactly right. After Orville Wright died in 1948, the NCR Corporation maintained his library and study as close as possible to what it looked like when Orville was alive, and so it's basically like a memorial to him. And so in the room you will see a Orville Wright's reading chair in his library. He especially modified the chair. He drilled a hole in each arm of the chair, built himself a book stand that could be placed on either arm of the chair, and then it could swivel in and out of his way so that he wouldn't have to sit there and actually hold his book or magazine or newspaper. We have his eyeglasses in that case next to the reading chair. There are other elements such as the center of the room. We have this light fixture that's wired from the ceiling light fixture. So here you have a multi-millionaire that could have afforded any modifications to his electricity in the house, but he chose to just do it the handyman way and wire it himself from one cord hanging there in the center of the room. All of the books that line the shelves on the left-hand side of the room here are his original books. He was an avid reader of everything from natural history, U.S. history, science, biology. So everything in here was his. One particularly powerful piece is that clock that's on the shelf up there. It's set to the time of 10:20, and that's the time that Orville Wright died on January 30th, 1948 at Miami Valley Hospital in Dayton from complications from his second heart attack. So it's sort of an interesting piece. NCR set that clock to that
So the
time.
dining room is a beautiful room too. There were a lot of events that happened in this room, weren't there?
Absolutely, a lot of family events that took place here, and we've got the original dining room table, the original sideboards or buffets. This was where Orville would really gather with his nephews and nieces, his older brothers while they were still living. So it's just a common family gathering space.
So it's a real relaxed household then. Wasn't very formal at all then.
Right. I mean, I would say, you know, Orville was not the type, because he was so shy, he was not the type to throw large parties. He's not going to be entertaining a lot of people. He would have more of a one-on-one conversation, or maybe a one with a small group. So if he had Henry Ford here, Henry Ford might have come with a small little entourage, and it would be Orville in that small group. But it wouldn't be Orville and 200 guests for a big party out on the lawn and in the house.
Just to be seen and to meet and greet.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Wasn't into that. Was he involved in a lot of organizations in Dayton?
You know, he
Civic
was.
organizations?
He was. He was on the board of the Wright Memorial Library in Oakwood, which was honoring him and his family name. He was involved with the American Red Cross. He was involved in a lot of charitable organizations. But he also went to his lab 6 days a week. So, I mean, it wasn't the type of thing where he would be out and about, you know, 6-7 days a week just doing meetings and.
So when he got older, though, I mean, after the flight and all that had already taken place, he was still a very active scientist, inventor.
He was the president of the Dayton Engineers Club that his friend Edward Deeds and Charles Kettering had formed. So he was involved in a lot of different things. He really was. But again, not a real socialite or anything like that. So this is Orville Wright's shower, and the main shower head is here. But what's interesting is that this is a wraparound needle shower where there are dozens and dozens of little pinholes or needle holes that shoot water out on these two different levels, and they could be adjusted with these knobs right here. Orville had sciatica and suffered from back pain and leg pain for much of his life, so these jets of hot water were really soothing to him and helped him deal with the pain.
It seems like it's such an intimate moment to be in a man who is, I mean, a world history icon, to be in his bedroom.
I think you're right. You know, he was on top of that, he was such a private and shy individual, so we really don't have any photos of his bedroom while he was alive. We have photos right after he died, but again, I think it's reflective of how shy and private of a person he is. I mean, there's probably no room that's more of a person's inner sanctum than their bedroom, and so here we are in his bedroom.
Are the brothers buried here in Dayton?
They are. Wilbur and Orville are buried in the family plot at Woodland Cemetery in Dayton, along with a lot of other Dayton, famous Dayton figures like the famous African-American poet Paul Laurence Dunbar. The writer Irma Bombeck is buried there. Just a lot of who's who of Dayton, Ohio. Charles F. Kettering, the famed inventor, is buried there. Colonel Deeds is buried there.
When Orville Wright passed away, so it was 1948.
Yes.
He had been in the hospital.
Yes.
So it was a vigil before he passed away, or was it sudden?
No, not much of a vigil. He died from complications of his second heart attack. What basically happened is he suffered his first heart attack while running up the steps of NCR's corporate headquarters building, Building 10. He was running late for lunch with his friend Colonel Deeds, who was chairman of the board at NCR. So he suffers his first heart attack on the steps of NCR Building 10. And then his doctors tell him to slow down and take it easy. And just like that advice that people get in 2012, they often don't follow the advice. He kind of continued up his regular pace. He went to his laboratory 6 days a week. And on a cold January day, he was attempting to fix the doorbell of Hawthorne Hill. And he was outside in the cold, then he would run down into his basement to his workbench, then he ran right back outside to work on the doorbell, back and forth, inside and outside a lot. Then he jumps in his car and goes to his laboratory and collapses with his second heart attack at his laboratory, and then dies in the hospital just about 2.5, 3 days later. So not really a vigil being held as such, but I think people sort of knew the end might be near.
When he passed away, was there a huge public service for him?
Yes, and now that's interesting. So Orville dies and had not been a member of any particular church. You know, here his father had been a church elder in the United Brethren in Christ Church, but from the time he's an adult until the end of his life, Orville never attended any church. So his friend Colonel Deed sort of came to the rescue again and arranged for Orville's funeral to be held at the First Baptist Church on Monument Avenue in downtown Dayton, a building that still stands in downtown Dayton. And so there was a overcapacity crowd for his funeral, and hundreds of people had visited the funeral home as well to pay their last respects to Orville. And then all of the elementary schools were closed in Dayton, and high schools were closed in Dayton to honor Orville. Churches tolled their bells. So I mean, it was very much an important event. People knew that something important had happened, that this amazing figure in world history had passed away. So, very powerful, I think, for the local community in particular. And certainly condolences came in from all across the country to the Wright family as well.
Sure. Wow.
Coming up next, more stories about you.
Hey, don't forget to set your DVR because you won't want to miss a single story on the Out of the Norm show every Sunday at 12 o'clock noon Eastern, 11 o'clock Central, right here on Rural TV, television for a growing world. Well, we want to thank you so much for bringing us out here to Orville Wright's home. I mean, this has been an amazing thing. I know you think of the icons that you read about in history books, but to feel the personality of the person in his little sitting room and being in his bedroom and everything, that was really interesting.
Oh, thank you. We're glad you could take some time to spend with us today at Hawthorne Hill. Really, the getting into the mind of the inventor, not just the famous pilot and famous engineer, but who he was as a human being. So we're always happy to have visitors visit us here and enjoy Hawthorne Hill.
He also was the first person to have a plane crash too, right?
He had it, yes he was. Kind of a dubious distinction, I guess. But.
Well, it's been great, and you taking the time to be here, and I want to thank everybody at Carillon Historic Park and everyone here in Dayton. It's been so nice to us while we've been here. We really appreciate it.
Well, great. We hope you and your visitors will come back, or viewers will come back and see us again.
Well, I'm sure you will when you're traveling. American history has different ways of expressing itself. Sometimes it's in culture and music, and it's sometimes in those great events like the first flight. Whether this is the home of aviation, it is the home of aviation. We'll give it that here in Dayton, even though the Outer Banks of Carolina say they're the first in flight. But it really took a lot of people and a combination of people to create this wonderful thing, this wonderful invention called flying. And it all started with American ingenuity and two young brothers in Dayton, Ohio. We hope you've enjoyed our trip here to Dayton today on the Out of the Norm show. We're going to be on the road here, and in just a few minutes, we're off to another city with another story about people, places, things, and events from all across America. We'll see you again very soon right here on the Out of the Norm show, where the stories are always all about you.
Loving the South and me just loving you.